Sheriff. Appreciate you being here. Today we're going to continue on, Sheriff, the Small Town 4. I appreciate you being here. Apologize for my voice. And I'll tell you what, we're doing a couple of days away today, which is where, you'll find out what's going to happen. Talbot was sitting behind the desk reading a letter. When Joe came in, he was just laying it down. Talbot looked at Joe for a long time without speaking. Under such intense scrutiny, Joe became nervous. Note the letter before the sheriff, he was becoming more and more sure that someone had written a serious complaint. Talbot saw the sweat and nervousness and shook his head. This wasn't a task he could send Joe on. He'd have to take it himself. Joe, I have a head up to the county jail for a couple of days. They're short-manned and need someone to monitor the kitchen inmates. I said you, but I think you might be more comfortable here. Inmates at the state level can be a conniving bunch and will try and pump you for information and try to get you into trouble. Suddenly realized he might be doing Joe a disservice. Well, unless you think this is something you want to do. It's only for 2 days. Joe was about to call Peggy and get her opinion. So I'll put a finger on the receiver. Joe, if you have to ask, then you aren't ready to take this kind of challenge. It's going to be difficult even for me, so sending you might be unfair. I'll take it while you keep things under control here. I gotta go home and get ready. See you on Friday. Joe was both hurt and a little relieved. Hurt that Talbot didn't feel he was equal to the task, and relieved because he didn't think he was either. Talbot explained the situation to Michaela. No, she wasn't happy about him going, but understood. She was well aware he wouldn't send Joe to do a job he wouldn't tackle himself. Once he did it, if it came up again, he'd be able to explain in greater detail what the job was and prepare him for it. Arriving at the state facility, he put everything, including his wallet, into the glove compartment and carried only his driver's license inside. He knew well enough that you don't even bring a stick of gum inside. Anything a prisoner could get from you was used as leverage. He wasn't about to give them an edge. He went in, showed his license, was given the briefing, and then sent to see the duty officer. Standing before the thick iron door, he braced himself. The sound of that door closing behind him was the most nerve-wracking sound he'd ever heard. Even though he knew he would be leaving when the shift was over, there was an air of finality to the sound. He met the warden and duty officer, was informed of his tasking and the rules of the establishment. Duty officer walked him to the kitchen. Yeah, the ones you're under your care are pretty cool, but think of yourself like a substitute teacher. They're going to try and do everything they can to make you slip up. They've got nothing better to do, so expect the unexpected and keep your guard up. You got a stick of gum? Talbot shook his head. I didn't bring anything in. I figured you'd have whatever I needed already here. Well, good thinking. Walking to the dining facility, Talbot was surprised to see some of the inmates with dogs. What's going on with the pets? They're training them for work with service animals. It's a rehabilitation program the warden is keen on. So far, it seems to be working pretty well. The inmates are enthusiastic about doing the job, and we have plenty who want to do it. Arriving at the entrance of the dining area, Talbot walked in looking all around, scanning faces and keeping a sharp eye out. He wanted them to see he was alert and there in mind and body. Entering the back, several inmates were already coming on duty. Talbot watched for smirks, smiles, and challenges. While this facility was for non-violent criminals, it still was a jail and treated accordingly. The men coming in were the regular inmate food service workers. They immediately set about their regular taskings. Talbot had to escort them to get the items that were required for the meal. These were all stacked on carts ready with day meal stickers. Pulling the breakfast cart was simple since it consisted of bread, cereal, milk, and coffee. Lunch was being readied as this was being served. Some of the inmates tried to borrow a stick of gum or a cigarette. Talbot apologized, but said he didn't use either. One of the cleaning crew offered to tell him which inmates were reliable and which weren't. Talbot informed him that he'd have to judge that for himself. All through the rest of the day, he was tested, prodded, cajoled, and evaluated. He considered what the duty officer had said was no more than right. He was content to do his job properly, making sure everything was accomplished, and they kept his nose clean. At the break between meals, the inmate workers ate and joked while the officers ate at a separate table and watched. Talbot ate soundly. He was eating the same thing the prisoners ate, and it was bland and practically tasteless. He was about to mention it, but decided to hold his tongue. Best not to complain within earshot of the inmates. Mentally, he made a note to write up to the warden about the ways to improve the food without endangering anyone. He was in the army. There were times the mess tent needed help, and if he was free, he'd volunteer. He learned a lot about flavors from the cooks. Since there were often times when spices didn't make it through, alternatives were found. Sometimes the alternative was better than the original. He was intelligent enough to understand that certain spices would not be allowed as they could be used dangerously by inmates. But with a little research, alternatives could be found. It was an interesting problem he would work on just for the fun of it. The research would probably never come in handy. In town, Joe was determined to prove that he was capable of running things on his own. He woke early, arrived at the courthouse before opening time, and set things to right. As the faxes came in, he posted or filed them, then went out for the first of his sorties. His departure from his office was heralded by an enormous bang that echoed off buildings. Sounded as if it had come from his garage. Bursting into a run, he tore down the street. Windows were going up as he passed, and people were looking out asking what had happened. Several men followed Joe and arrived to see the garage was fine. Joe was perplexed. He looked around for anything else in the area that could have exploded or made such an explosive bang. The men fanned out, searching for any damage. Jacob came out, wiping his hands off with a rag. "What's all the hubbub, bub?" "I heard a loud bang. I thought the place had blown up." Jacob turned red and beckoned Joe inside. On the floor was a rim from a large truck, and spread over the ground were remnants of what had been a very large tire. Jacob explained, "I was filling it up and was taking forever. I had to piss and figured I had plenty of time while it filled. Guess I didn't have as long as I thought." Joe slapped Jacob on the side of his head for scaring half the town and went back on his round. Passing the co-op, he saw several people wet and drying themselves off as best they could. Told him that water balloons were falling from somewhere, but nobody knew where. Joe went to a high building, climbed to the roof, and looked down towards the co-op. A couple of boys had a small box of balloons and were racing from one building to another, dropping them on people. Flying down a drain, he leapt to the next building over and ran across the roof and leapt the gap into the roof of the co-op. As the boys ran back to get another balloon, they saw Joe and screeched to a halt. Falling back onto their rumps, they scrambled to get back up. Joe soon had them cuffed and was trying to figure out how to get them down off the roof into the courthouse. He turned towards the roof ladder. The sound of metal dropping into the tarred turf made them snap around. The boys were small and had slipped easily out of the cuffs. They leapt easily over to the next building and slid down the ladder. Joe knew who they were and could call their parents as soon as he could. As he, sorry, my voice is just shot today. As he continued his walk, he shook his head. It seemed as if it was going to be one of those days. A call came in over his radio. Peggy was at the courthouse and wanted to see if he could meet up for breakfast. He left before she had woken and hadn't had any, so he agreed. After a hearty breakfast, he continued his round with Peggy accompanying him. Walking down Levy Avenue, he saw 6-year-old Mark sitting on the stoop of his house. He was hunched over and had that seriously angry look that's so funny on someone so small. He saw Joe and Peggy and ran up to them. My mom will give me a cookie." The door was open. Joe could see into the house. Mark's mother was pulling something out of the oven. From the smell, there was more cookies, and they smelled great. Joe could well understand the child's frustration. Peggy nudged Joe. He walked up to the house and knocked. Mrs. Lowdy approached, confused as to what the deputy could want. Deputy Steckler, isn't it? Is there a problem? Joe worked hard to contain his grin. Mrs. Lowdy, under Article 15 of the Family Harmony Code, Mark was entitled to one freshly baked cookie for quality control. And from the smell coming outside, Peggy and I wouldn't mind one either. Laughing, she invited them inside and handed over cookies and milk. Looking at Mark, she tousled his hair. I can't believe you got the police on me for not giving you a cookie. He grinned and sighed as he ate another. I love cookies. Joe leaned over. Yeah, me too, especially when they're this good. Finished off the milk and helped wash up with Peggy drying. As Mrs. Lowdy escorted them to the door, she was smiling. You didn't have to help clean up, but I appreciate it. She handed over a few more wrapped in a napkin, passing them to Peggy for later. She closed the door, laughing. Passing the field, they found a couple of girls running around dragging a kite behind them. Peggy raced to them and picked up the kite. She held it up, running as they ran, and when she felt the wind against the paper, she tossed it up. Two children screamed in delight as their kite soared into the air. Joe and Peggy watched as the kite weaved back and forth as the girls tugged and dashed around. Thanks, miss, they yelled as Joe and Peggy turned to leave. Joe remembered he had to talk to the parents about the water balloons. Peggy was trying to get him to drop it since he was just a prank. Kids used water and nobody that got hit filed a complaint. Joe looked at Peggy. You're saying I shouldn't even talk to the parents? Peggy shrugged. I seem to remember that we did something like that when Sheriff Morgan was sheriff. We were using balloons, too. Did he talk to your parents? Joe blushed. No. Did he talk to yours? No, but I went back and cleaned up the mess we caused and saw that you were doing it, too. Getting caught was enough for us. Maybe it's enough for them. Walking back the way they came, they passed the co-op, and sure enough, the two boys were out there cleaning up the balloons and throwing them away. When they saw Joe, they came up and apologized and begged him not to snitch on them. Joe was feeling generous. Well, I guess no real harm was done, and nobody complained, so we'll let it slide this time. Just be careful. Had one landed on someone your age, it could have really hurt them. Her eyes drew wide. Gosh, we didn't want to hurt anybody. We were just having fun. Joe patted them on the back and sent them on their way. Go on, have some fun some other way. They dropped the remains of the balloons in the trash and ran off. It was getting late, and Joe did a final check of the phone and messages, checked the facts, cleaned up, and went home. Talbot arrived for shift the following morning on time and squared away. He entered the facility after a check and walked into the dining facility without incident. Greeting the morning crew, he checked what was required for the day, pulled the cart for the morning meal, and checked what would be needed for the lunch menu. He learned the name of the inmates the day before and greeted each one by name. Professionally friendly, he treated each person the same. When he had to correct someone, he had them step aside and did it privately. The inmates began to thaw. He realized quickly that Talbot might be temporary, but he was there 100%, and he was experienced enough that he wasn't an easy mark. As they were preparing lunch, Talbot felt something wasn't quite right. It wasn't as if anyone was doing anything wrong, but something in the air that put him on edge. So long as there was no immediate threat, he decided to say nothing. Could be his inexperience in dealing with inmates, so he continued his day as he had started it. Breaks were usually taken between meals, and his crew ate, talked, and joked as usual. He was beginning to feel he might have been mistaken, but he couldn't shake the feelings he was having. For him, it was similar to when he had been in the military. Usually, before an attack, there was a change in the air. Something wrong you couldn't put your finger on, but it made you keep your back to something solid. Made you try and grow eyes in the back of your head. Men walked around in pairs or threes, so no one had a blind spot. You stayed keyed up, and when the attack finally came, it actually relaxed you a little. You knew what you had to meet now and met it head on. No bravado, just skill and watch your buddy's back. Looking around, he saw that some of the guards must have felt something as well. They walked in pairs and talked softly to each other. By the time dinner was prepared, Talbot was definitely on edge. He did his job efficiently and professionally, and when his shift was over, he pulled the duty officer to escort him out. On the way, he stopped to tell of his feelings. Officer Woodrow, have you been feeling that something isn't right? Well, what do you have in mind? Well, I just have a feeling that something's going to happen. Nobody said anything to me. I haven't heard anything. It's just a feeling I've got. It's like when I was back in the war before an attack. The air in there feels like that. Officer Woodrow grinned and patted Talbot on the shoulder. Sheriff, I think the place is just getting to you. Lots of first-timers get the jitters in here. No shame in that. And you handled the last 2 days as if you'd done this for years. You've got not only my respect, but the inmates as well. Tell you what, you go back to your town and enjoy it. After here, it's going to feel like a breath of spring air. Officer Woodrow walked him to the gate and wished him well. Talbot did feel a release of tension on leaving the place. Amazing the difference between the inside and out here. Talbot paused, took one last look. He was glad he took it on instead of sending Joe. Joe was a great guy, friendly and gregarious, always ready to do anything anybody asked of him. Not a good thing in a place like this. The inmates would have walked all over him. He drove home and slept in his own bed. 2 days away had made a difference. He was tense and his night terrors had returned. Michaela did her best to soothe him with love and affection. At work, he returned with a renewed sense of thankfulness for the town he called home. Still maintained his usual vigilance, but he could relax and enjoy being in town, out in the farm areas and breathing the clean farm scents. Joe told him about those 2 days and all that had happened. Kaylee and Peggy brought them lunch and they sat around talking. Talbot collected a fax that came in with a notice that the county jail was an emergency lockdown and that a riot had broken out. Okay, the next chapter is negotiations. Now, just a quick thing on this. A lot of my books, and I've got a few, have been written in part based on my experiences. I'm 65 years old, so I've had quite a few. I was in the military, went to a lot of countries, went to a lot of places, had a lot of things happen. Sometimes not too fun, but it did give me a lot of material. So a lot of the things that I've done in my life are in these books, and this is kind of one of them. It's the basis of it was when I worked at Warren County. I got taken on as the director for food service at that particular facility and lasted about 2 months. There is nothing more frightening than hearing that gate close behind you as you walk through. And I don't care if you know you're leaving at the end of your shift, it still is a hell of a sight and a hell of a sound to hear behind you. So that was one of the few things I was not comfortable with. And after about 2 months, I said, you know what, this isn't for me. I can't do this. And the duty watch officer kind of told me, he said, when you first walked in here, yeah, I had a feeling you weren't going to last long. This, being in the military and being in here, two different things. So just wanted to point that out. Yes, I did work at a place like this, and I did not enjoy it at all. So the next one is negotiations. I was never in anything where a riot was in, so I didn't have to deal with that. So anyways, that's it for today. I appreciate you being here. Hope you enjoy this chapter. I look forward to seeing you on Friday. So be good and be good to yourself. Bye.